God made a covenant with Israel, and that covenant is encapsulated in the Ten Commandments. Notice also that in chapter 5 and verse 3, he said God did not make this covenant with our fathers. That would have been people like Adam and Noah and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. It was not made with those great patriarchs of the Old Testament. He said it's made with all of us here alive this day. That is the reason that we have written here on the chart that this law was given only to the Jews. Surprisingly, most of the world today thinks the Ten Commandments were given to the entire world. And yet in this text we learn that God gave the Ten Commandments just to the Jewish nation. The rest of the world were under a general moral code just like had been revealed in the book of Genesis. So, the main thing we want to notice here is that at this particular point, God has only the Israelites out at Mount Horeb, and He has given them His covenant, which is encapsulated in the Ten Commandments. That is not all of God's commands. We will see that the whole law of Moses comes out of those Ten Commandments, and all of His laws are founded within those 10 that He gives to Israel in the Old Testament. Now, after Israel received these commandments, God prepared them to leave Mount Sinai, Mount Horeb area, the Sinai Peninsula, travel north, and after wandering in the wilderness for 40 years because of their disobedience, they come to the land of Canaan, which is known today as the land of Israel. Now, at this particular point, God allows them to go in and conquer the land of Canaan and drive the people out because of the wickedness of the Canaanites. After they drive out the Canaanites, God set up over them a period of judges. The period of judges lasts about 450 years. And we have judges like Samson and Deborah and Gideon and some of the famous men and women of old. During this period of time, God was their king. But God would use these judges as military leaders who would deliver the Israelites from captivity of nations that would conquer them during the years in which they would become wicked. The period of Judges is some of the worst periods of Israel history because of how wicked they eventually became. In fact, the last verse of Judges says there was no king in those days, and every man did what was right in his own eyes. Does that sound a little bit like what we see in our world today? If we continue in this way, we're going to end up just like that particular period. So this goes to about the period of about 1050 BC. When we get to that time, the Israelites cried out to God and said, "We want a king like the other nations." And so God gave them kings. The first king was Saul. The second king was David. The third king was Solomon. Most folks remember David and Solomon. They were the greatest kings that Israel had. David, of course, was the standard for all other kings that came after him. Solomon also was a very wise king and a great king the first half of his reign. But as he grew older, he became more lax in his service to God. In fact, one of the things that caused Solomon to fall was that he had married 1,000 women. Can you imagine? 1,000 women. I would suppose, if you don't mind, that would probably make anybody wicked. If not, I don't know what I'd do with all the credit cards. But Solomon was just that way. He had gotten to the point that he had married all these women, and many of the women that he married were foreign wives who didn't believe in God and who believed in idolatry. And because of this, Solomon, loving them, would erect idols for them. And he led all of Israel then into idolatry. God, of course, was angry with Solomon, and because of that, he promised Solomon that after his death, his son would no longer reign over a united kingdom. And that's exactly what happened. Solomon died around 931 BC. His son Rehoboam took the throne, and Rehoboam was a real fool. And the northern part of the kingdom rebelled against Rehoboam and would no longer follow him. From that time on, there were actually two nations in Israel. The northern kingdom was called Israel. The southern kingdom was called Judah, after the principal tribe of Judah. Now, the northern kingdom never had a good king over it, in a little over 210-year history. Finally, around 721 BC, they became so wicked that God sent the Assyrian Empire in to conquer them and take them all away captive, and they have pretty well been lost to the world. That part of the nation never came back together. The southern kingdom of Judah was a little better kingdom, but by 606 BC they had become just as wicked as their sister in the north. And then that's when God brought the Babylonian Empire in and took them all away captive, ultimately destroying the temple and the city of Jerusalem in 586 BC. But God had promised through Jeremiah that their captivity into Babylon would only last 70 years.